Let's delve deeper into rainbow philosophy. Far beyond that of Cloudsdale's mythology, it's easy to misjudge that floating city, with its alluring decor and social psychology. Against an empty carriage at the end of the lonely hall were three imposing ponies, leaning in a disinterested and bored pose. One of them happened to look up as the sorry-looking trio stumbled out into the open. They were at the bottom edge of the Colosseum, with the vast rolling hills and plains of Equestria visible far below. "Hey, boss, we got some damn worthless Pegasuses," the first one called to an even bigger pony on the other side of the carriage. "I suppose it's get to work time, is it?" "Cool it, hotshot. There may be more, too." "No, I was the last student to go." "I can't even do that," Scootaloo spoke in sobs. Orion could only hang his head. "It's..." She paused, and then breathed deeply, determined to remain as strong as she could. "It's just us three. Aurora's wings. They're broken. She needs help." "Ain't that just a crying shame? It is. What's it to us? All the better she don't come flying back to us no more." "Hey, we may have failed our damn test, but that doesn't mean we're not worth keeping alive," Scootaloo shouted in a flash of rage. She was determined to hold on to as much dignity as she could. All right, sheesh. Hey, Patches, doctor her up before we head out. I don't want any blood on them seats. I just wash that thing. You other two in the cart." Orion and Sulu hopped into the carriage and got as comfortable as they could on the hard seats, but made sure to leave room for Aurora. As soon as the third of the large ponies finished bandaging her wings, Aurora carefully stepped onto the vehicle and lay down on the bench at the back. Scootaloo inched closer to her and leaned down and talked as the door to the carriage slammed shut. The boss pony was inside the back, standing by the door, watching each of them. "So," Scootaloo began quietly, trying not to speak too loud. "Hey, you're Aurora. I'm Scootaloo. I'm sorry we had to meet like this." "Any meeting of a friend is a welcome meeting," Aurora spoke gently with a sincerity in her eyes. "We did our best. That's all we can say. That's all any of us can say. Who's to say that the city is of the deported isn't a good one anyways?" The thought struck Scootaloo as she considered it. No one was ever told about where the Pegasi were brought. Most ponies considered it to be some odd land, like where the zebras hailed from. That made Scootaloo realize something even more profound. "Hey, if where we're taken, where if where we're taken is where Zakora's from, then there's got to be a way to get back. It's not as if we're banned from Equestria. Fluttershy, an old friend of mine, she's a Pegasus who lived in Ponyville. She never passed flight school. She never took her test. They've never come and taken her away." "Exactly," Aurora agreed with a nod. Orion overheard and offered his thoughts. "I think that the reason we're sent far away is because no pony from Cloudsdale ever wants to admit that someone who failed flight school could come from their city. That's a fucking horrible place, now that I think of it. If I never want to go back. Maybe that's why no Pegasus ever comes back. They just don't like Cloudsdale." "You goddamn worthless ponies are hardly call yourself Pegasuses." Boss spoke from the door. He was swaying ever so slightly as the carriage was lifted and moved to an unknown location. "Useless failures is what you are. No pony comes back from exile, regardless of reason. Can't even pass your goddamn test. You make me sick." Scootaloo jumped up from her seat, lifted herself into the air with her wings, and dove legs first at Boss. "You shut the hell up about us. You have no right to treat others like this." Boss raised the hoofed and backhand Scootaloo out of the air onto the floor. "I can treat you however I want. You hardly classify as ponies to Cloudsdale, or any of a question for that matter. Now sit the fuck down and shut up until you get to your destination." "Where are we being taken anyways?" "Not like we can tell anyone now, and I'm sure as the deliverers you guys should know," Orion cautiously reasoned. "Hell if I know. We hand the carriage off to ponies in suits, and we get back full of coins. Keep quiet about the whole thing. It's how it's always been for 1,000 years." three fillies huddled together about again, scared of the unknown. They kept quiet as they waded through the unbearable trip, all lost in their own thoughts. Friends, family, loved ones, and pets. All will never see them again, and some would never find out why. An hour passed, and then another. Finally, the uncomfortable quiet was broken by a sudden lurch as the cart stopped in its flight. Ah, Boss smiled. There's my stop. You ponies play nice now, have fun, and wherever the hell you're sent to. The carriage door shuffled open, and Boss hopped out with a gust of cold wind. It was night outside now, with hardly any light to see at all. Scootaloo stared outside and noticed another figure staring in. It was dressed in a black suit, its tail dyed an unnatural black that never occurred in nature. Its face was covered by a dark, loose-fitting mask, concealing its mane. All that was visible were rose-colored eyes, staring indifferently at the three ponies inside. They stopped on Scootaloo momentarily, recognizing, but she stared back. A second passing, the dark pony slammed the door shut and the carriage took off once again. At least we can talk now, Aurora whispered in the dark. And they had nothing to talk about. But with all great things comes a great responsibility, that of Cloudsdale being weather stability. The carriage finally shuddered to a stop. The three desolate foals blinked their eyes awake, having all resolved to conserve energy for whatever came next. With a loud scraping noise, the doors shook and then swung wide open. Several more ponies, obscured by masks and suits, were moving around the area. Scootaloo blinked against the light from what she was seeing. They were in a cloud building. As her eyes adjusted, she noticed more details. Several of the blackened ponies were rushing around, some holding clipboards, some carrying briefcases, and other important-looking items on their backs. The complex was full of machinery and signs. Pipes ran along the ceiling, and a loud whir ran in the background, occasionally joined with other industrial sounds such as crashes and alarms. Scootaloo gasped. This place! The architecture! It's all so familiar! I think we're in the weather factory! Orion frowned. That can't be right. We were traveling for way too long. We got to be far away from Equestria now, not to mention the city. Actually, Scootaloo may be right, Aurora mused. I noticed. It was maybe the same amount of time from when we left the Colosseum to the place the carriage drivers swapped. That it was from the swap place to here. But I don't know. I'm confused. Maybe that's just a coincidence. Welcome, mules. The large and powerful voice commanded. Several of the suited ponies moved to make way for a deep, dark red Pegasus, dressed in a white lab coat. You degenerates are probably wondering where exactly you are. Stupid fillies. You're in Cloudsdale. The Rainbow Factory, to be correct. Allow me to show you around. What's going on here? What's going on here? Do you expect to use us as slaves? Because I'd rather be deported, thanks. Scootaloo yelled. Orion and Aurora got off their seats and stood behind Scootaloo, nodding in agreement. Like you failures have a choice. You'll be here for the rest of your lives. Oh, I'm sorry. Where are my manners? I am Dr. Atmosphere. My degree isn't a medical one, I shall reassure you, in case you're picturing some dreadful surgery going on behind the scenes. Strange how so many worthless ponies get that idea. No, my degree is in engineering. I'm one of the 4 colts in this facility. I'm sure you've all had the tour of the lower factory, no? The 3 ponies nodded slowly, unsure of what was going on. Excellent. Who can tell me where the tour begins? Orion spoke up first. Where the spectra comes from, upstairs, and is mixed. Very good. What a pity you're utterly useless to the flock. You could have been a smart one. Dr. Atmosphere smiled sadistically and patted Orion on the head. But today we're on the upper floor. Please follow me, and don't get too far behind, or one of my helpers will be forced to encourage you. With that, he winked at the suited ponies. With nods, 3 of them in the rear leaned forwards and jabbed each of the Pegasus with tasers, shocking them to the ground. Dr. Atmosphere whinnied in laughter as they all yelped and fell, and continued into a soft chuckle as they all stood up again. Scootaloo blinked, more tears from her eyes, and shook herself again, trying to lose the tingling in her nerves. She turned and quickly looked at each of the suited ponies, catching each of them in the eye she could when she could. None of them were the rose-eyed pony from the carriage. Begrudgingly, she started walking behind the red engineer. You simply must be careful in this department, Dr. Atmosphere began in a tone not like the many tour guides in the lower floors. There's plenty of nooks and crannies and vents and vats one could fall into. One may be careful not hurt themselves after all. You're all hopeless as it is. Any more so, and even we couldn't use you. He glanced behind them maliciously as the three fools frowned in insult. They were walking down a series of halls with vibrating machines and assembly lines lining the way, occasionally ducking under low-hanging wires or carefully stepping over steaming pipes. As they walked, though, the building became cooler and cooler. All three were watching, sensing, looking for any way out. They couldn't see any. Now let me tell you a story. Cloudsdale is where the weather is made. Without us, the rest of Equestria would starve, freeze, drown, and generally be a not very happy place. That gives us a special honor, one that can't be tainted by incompetent foals like you. How could the world look up and trust us as if Pegasi, like you, are flying around wearing a Cloudsdale name? No, we need to be something with all of you. We needed to do something with all of you. And then we got a delicious idea one day. Over 1,000 years ago. Those were some smart ponies back then, I'll say. You don't find too many of them these days, but I disagree. I digress. Haha. Here. Now, through these doors, quickly now, before more encouragement is supplied. Dr. Atmosphere opened a heavy-looking door in a cramped corridor and offered a hoof inside. Scootaloo stared up at him. He glanced at a suited pony. Scootaloo and the others walked inside as he laughed again. Enjoy the rest of your pitiful life. And with that, he slammed the door closed. They all turned and looked at the big room they had been led to. It was fairly open and empty, almost like a theater room. At one end of the room there was 6 square vats, each one nearly full with individual spectra. Above them was a peculiar-looking machine from a central stack. 6 hoses broke off and led above each of the individual vats. At the top of the stack was a single opening, red with rust despite the rest of the machine to be shiny and clean. Even further above that was a fairly complex-looking object, with chains and gears hanging off of beams and pipes loosely. Running even higher than the whole machine was a length of scaffolding, with doors on either side leading out of the room. Down on the floor, a small collection of defeated, crying ponies sat chatting quietly. Those suits! There. Those are from that other flight school across town, Aurora informed, sounding shocked. And those other ponies sitting over there, see? I remember a trip we went on once with Levitating Acres private school. I remember them from that trip. So, this is where all the failures go. No, not deported, but forced to work forever. Orion sobbed quietly in exchanging for helping someone. He had doomed himself and his good friend for a life of servitude. Scootaloo reached a reassuring wing over and lifted his chin. She smiled at him, understanding his depression. At least we don't have to go through it alone, she cooed softly. Suddenly there was a commotion in the group of ex-students. One pony from an unidentified school took off, headed toward one of the doors on the scaffolding. Immediately, 2 suited ponies launched at record speed and both clipped to fly away with their tasers. The pony spasmed in air and then dropped like a stone. With an audible crack as he landed, the violent burst of twitching. All the other ponies walked back, staring horrified at their friend. They watched hopefully for a long time. He didn't move. Some cried softly. Most others turned away, too far confused to feel any more emotions. I guess that option's out, Aurora quietly said to no one in particular. But you can't fly right now anyways, Orion questioned. That medic guy, Patches, whatever he was called, he popped my wings back into their joints and bandaged up where my skin tore. I won't be winning any races, but I can fly again. They slowly walked forward and joined the groups of ponies, looking at each other with understanding sorrow. Eyes front and center, you inept mules, one of the suited ponies shouted. After the previous display, no one challenged that order and stared at the scaffolding, just as one of the doors opened.